Hey people, I'm sure, like myself, a lot of you, if not most, have realized that there's a big reset happening. And while I don't agree with a lot of the policies and political pressure that's been placed on humanity, I want to think that we can use this opportunity to, evaluate our circumstances and make conscious steps in helping to heal the hurt and ourselves in the process. Like Martin Luther King and a lot of you, I'm pretty sure, I also have a dream. I've been really passionate about this dream, and to be honest, I've been selfish with this dream, and for years, I've been trying to accomplish this on my own, you know. But the Word Party Kid song says, sharing is caring, and I think it's full time now. I come out and share my dream, and see if I could get some people on board to help me uh, make this a possibility, because we definitely need to change course from what's happening right now in the world.
Me start that one, yeah. Like how Martin Luther King would have started. My dream, my dream, my dream, my dream, my dream.
My dream is to help humanity be able to afford healthy food so we can all thrive. I think for far too long, a lot of us have just merely been trying to survive.
Because we are suffering under prosperity. Tell you my dream is to live my dream. Hear the most I in me sleep when me sleep. Tell you my goal, my goal, my goal. I want to also play my part in helping to reduce some of my generation as well as past generations' carbon footprint by removing as much solid waste from our land and waterways as possible.
Visit Refuge Key close to Port Royal for a first-hand look at how solid waste is destroying the wetlands.
Arriving at Refuge Key just off the shores of Port Royal, an unpleasant greeting. Garbage in the waters of the Kingston Harbour, which were not there when I last visited in January 2020.
Whenever we have, significant periods of rainfall or any period of rainfall, the gullies tend to empty. And as they empty, it brings that garbage across the harbour and over to areas like Refuge Key.
A closer look at the solid waste on Refuge Key showed much more plastic than I had. Included household items such as bleach containers, rice bags, slippers, and of note, old refrigerators. I counted 6 of them. But Senior Scientific Officer at the University of the West Indies Center for Marine Sciences, CMS, Patrice Francis, says there's significantly less plastic since the national ban on single-use plastic took effect in January last year. Still off the coast of Port Royal, in another mangrove forest called Gallows Point, even more garbage. We're told it's how Refuge Key would look without the protection of the booms.
So in order to get to the soil over here, we would have to dig down to more than a feet before we get any.
Garbage at Gallows Point has never been cleaned, and CMS says it will cost a pretty sum to remove over 20 years of garbage buildup. Meanwhile, at Refuge Key, funding is being sourced for another cleanup. The area was first cleaned in 2018 at an estimated $7 million.
Because we are suffering under prosperity.
So I've always thought about a closed loop style of farming where nothing goes to waste. And I strongly believe that if this type of farming method had been implemented and practiced earlier on, mankind wouldn't be faced with this dilemma of global warming and massive impending famine.
Because we are suffering under prosperity.
Yeah, so a quick introduction for those of you seen this that don't know me. So I'm the first child for my dad and the second for my mother. I was named at birth Damien Carty, and after completing secondary school at Charlie Mount High in St. Catherine, I held the position of sanitation manager at Mid-Island Poultry. I then joined the ICF in 2004 and after gaining a spot of one of the most coveted sections of the then combined, there was 2 police forces then, and after combined 2, after gaining a spot there, I resigned and immigrated to Canada, where I studied heavy equipment operations and pursued a career in trucking. So this was solely though to get enough money to invest in my farming dreams. After getting injured in a business venture, I went back to school at Lakehead University, where I'm presently pursuing a degree in environmental studies. So while I make this recording, I am on a sabbatical and trying to raise funds to continue my farming efforts. My passion for farming was born from a very young age. I grew up into a farming family where my grandparents farm had dozens of free grazing cattle, acres of richly cultivated land with bananas, plants, coffee, beans for export, pimento for exporting, pineapples, passion fruits, native coconuts, soursop, sugar cane, yams, and other tumors, vegetables along such the sort, They planted everything pretty much. And my grandmother would be selling every weekend in the local farmers market.
Yeah, the destruction of the local dairy industry weakened the long-term food security of Jamaica. The family farm is now overgrown and requires equipment to get it operational again.
I also enjoyed farming in high school, though I didn't do the GCE agricultural exam. A few of my classmates and I enjoyed taking care of the chickens for the school canteen and the school farm. A most memorable experience was when we cooked the chickens that were a bit battered in the plucking process. We curried them with boiled dumplings. I remember the smile on Copper's face like it was yesterday. Ryan Smalls was the only one that did the agricultural exam in GCE from my group. My love for agriculture grew, and I built a large chicken coop and sold eggs and chicken while I was a police officer in Jamaica. The passion grew, and I started Carty's Airy Farm as a business after I immigrated to Canada.
So my vision for Carty's Airy Farm is to focus on cash crops and livestock. The cash crop aspect would entail mostly vegetables and tumors, while the livestock would include chickens, both layers and broilers, pigs, goats, cows, fishes, and bees. The first aim would be composting, using a compost system to make our fertilizer and abstain from the manufactured ones that can be harmful to the soil and plants. Secondly, to reuse the excess produce to feed the livestock.
For dealing with the pest, crop rotation and our other eco-friendly pest control measures would be used. As I said, the refuse from the produce could be used to feed the livestock. The waste from the pig pen could be used to produce propane. That methane is a biogas that can be recovered. We'd use simpler techniques to do this, but ideally I would like to invest in an anaerobic digester, but that costs money, so that will be future plans. We would have an apiary with a very healthy family of bees to help with pollination, and the production of honey is a very profitable commodity as well. Looking to getting or building a few fish ponds and using the wastewater from the fish ponds to for irrigation of the crops. Talked about different techniques in farming. I know a lot of people might not be familiarized with some or the terms, but not understand the full concept of it. So I've attached a few videos for your information if you want to stay and watch. I have also entertained the idea of building a non-for-profit retreat center with a team of committed people, with the aim of developing an understanding, ethics, and responsibility regarding the environment and stewardship through formal and informal teaching that links nature and humans, where interested people can attend for various reasons, such as mental health care, to experience nature and serenity, and to have the opportunity to learn about regenerative farming or sustainable living. They can also take yoga or swimming lessons. I would like to offer year-round experimental environmental educational programs such as school field trips and nature immersion learning experiences, youth and family camps, programs and events for all ages, day tours and programs, adult learning experience, wildlife programs, comfortable lodging for 50 people, in a rustic and camp setting, options.
And bring down nutrients. Keep the soil covered with an organic mulch, which will break down over time, adding more organic matter to the soil. From the release of methane to clearing forests for pasture land, cattle raising is known for being very environmentally destructive. But this is not inherent to grazing animals. If the right practices are put in place, enormous amounts of carbon can be sequestered into the ground, soil can be built, and even desertification can be reversed in a matter of years. Here's how it works. The growth of grass tends to start slow, accelerate, and slow down again. This middle area is where it accrues the most biomass the most efficiently. If it's eaten before it gets to this point, its growth will never speed up. This is what happens with traditional pastured animals. They eat all the grass, which doesn't have the chance to grow back fast enough before getting eaten again, and we have overgrazing. This leads to soil erosion, drought, and desertification. But if the animals are kept in a tightly packed herd, like they used to be in nature, the grass has time to grow before being eaten. All that biomass in the grass is carbon that comes from the air. Not all of the grass gets eaten, however. Some of it gets pooped on and trampled, which ends up creating the perfect conditions for new topsoil to be built. This ends up happening incredibly quickly. This is one of the most complex and location-dependent practices there are. I will therefore be overgeneralizing a bit. It always starts with observing a local forest and the relationships between everything in it. The plants, the animals, the fungi, the landscape, the soil, the water, and then recreating these relationships in a way that's just as ecologically resilient, but produces more food. Food forests are often thought of as comprising 7 layers: the root layer, the ground cover layer, the herb layer, the shrub layer, the low tree layer, the high tree layer, and the vine layer. Every one of these layers either produces some sort of food or medicine, or is in some way helpful to the system as a whole. The plants are mostly perennials and include as many native species as possible. These 3 examples of regenerative agriculture, plus all the rest of them, all have something in common. Whereas in conventional agriculture, you seek to create as many of one thing as possible, in regenerative agriculture, you seek to create as many relationships between things as possible. You are one of those things. What sort of relationship with the land do you want to foster?
I have been managing a fairly large community composting facility for years. It is a core part of this Red Gardens project, where most of the organic material generated in the gardens and in the surrounding landscape is mixed in with the household compost from our own house and from quite a few of my neighbors, and this provides an essential source of soil amendment and fertility for the vegetable gardens. And the methods that I use to manage this composting facility have evolved over the years, with significant changes since I last talked about it almost 5 years ago. The main purpose of the changes were to reduce the amount of work that it takes to manage this substantial amount of material, which was possible in part because of changes in how I've been controlling the rot population. I also made a series of panels for creating the compost containers, which enabled me to easily set up each new compost pile and to allow a lot more air into the material, which improves the decomposition process. And this focus on built infrastructure and changes in simple processes have drastically reduced the amount of work that I need to put in. And I still end up with good quality compost in the end, And all of the numerous people who add material to this compost still only need to follow the one rule. This composting area started as a way for me to recycle old plants and other garden wastes, as well as material from the surrounding landscape, into a useful soil amendment and source of fertility for the vegetable gardens. And this gradually developed to the point where over 30 households use this facility for most of their compostable material, as well as all the material that they add from the gardens. In the process, I became the manager of a significant community composting facility, all without any signs, instructions, or notices. There's quite a lot of material going through this system, with a large bin being filled over the course of about a month, and I try to keep everything simple, especially for all those people adding material. I've always been keen to avoid the typical advice, rules, and restrictions that are usually associated with small-scale or household composting, mainly because I believe that we need to find ways to deal with all of the potentially problematic material within local compost systems, rather than sending it all away to somebody else to deal with. I used to refer to this as the no-rules compost, because from the standpoint of my community, for the people who add material to the compost, they can ignore the rules they typically come across about what they can and cannot add. But there is actually one rule relating to material added to the compost system, that people can add anything that was recently alive, including plants and vegetable scraps, of course, but also cooked meat, bones, oils, bread, citrus, as well as pernicious weeds, diseased plants, cardboard, paper, and even dead chickens and some roadkill have gone in. And the challenge for me was to adapt the system to be able to handle this continuous flow of a wide mix of different material and to make it easy for everyone else to use, and so that they didn't need to find other composting systems to handle the material that is usually seen as problematic. The last time I talked about this, the system I had been using was managing all of this for the most part, but it was way too much work for me and had a few other issues. But I have since changed a few things so that it is much easier and simple for all of us, as well as being tidier. The old system was based on piles of compost that moved, each one being turned 7 to 10 times before being ready to use. It started in 2 bins made out of scrap plywood with holes drilled in for a bit of air and a makeshift lid, with the first bin designated for loading, which was emptied into the second bin when it became too full, and then was turned into loose piles of compost after that. The challenge for me was to turn all of the piles in the row so that there was space to empty the main loading bin when it became full. This was a lot of work and a lot of digging to move all these piles, and I occasionally built separate larger compost piles during the active growing season for the large amounts of material from the gardens and surrounding landscape so that the bin would not fill so quickly. But this separation of material wasn't ideal, as I found it was a lot better to mix it all in together. I tried a few options to reduce this workload, but ended up adopting a system where the loading bin itself moved instead of the piles of compost. This reduced the pressure on me to turn the compost in time, as well as the amount of work involved, as each batch was only turned once or twice in total, and the bin could fill quickly when there was lots of material to add, and I could simply move it to the next location and start a new bin. The one main benefit to the old system was that all of the compost was turned quite regularly, which mixed and incorporated all of the material, and it also added air into the mix, which helped to speed up the decomposition process. This was important, as I never felt that I had enough compost available each season, so was keen for the whole process to speed up. But a few years ago, I began to buy in additional finished municipal compost in large bags and even larger quantities, and this took pressure off, which meant that the whole process could slow down, allowing the decomposition to take longer and for the stock of my own compost to build up. The other benefit of turning was to prevent sections of the compost pile from becoming anaerobic, where the supply of oxygen ran out, which slowed down decomposition, smelt really bad, and became a source of methane. I have become increasingly concerned about the production of this potent greenhouse gas within the composting process, and although I have no idea how much methane gas could potentially be produced in a problematic compost pile at this scale, I wanted to greatly reduce the possibility. Maintaining a good mix of material definitely helped the situation, but I decided to make the enclosing sides of the compost bin out of wire mesh stapled to a wooden frame. This is obviously much better at allowing air into the mix of decomposing material than holes drilled in a sheet of plywood. And more recently, I built bases of heavy-duty wire mesh held off the ground to allow air to flow underneath, and it also lets excess liquid drain away. Allowing air to access a large volume of material from all sides and top